Going back more than 4 millennia to the Indus Valley civilization, the Indian subcontinent has been a fertile ground for diversity in thought, inquiry, and exploring spiritual realms. In this land, deep thinking is not relegated to the books or a select few, but becomes mainstream through spiritual practices. Here is a land that wholeheartedly supports diversity in our beliefs, explorations, and thus became the sacred birthplace for many world religions. In this video, we'll journey back in time to map a grand timeline of the Indian philosophy. We'll then immerse ourselves in the vibrant and rebellious era of the Shramana movement, uncovering the social and intellectual ferment that challenged ancient traditions. Finally, we'll meet the revolutionary thinkers of the Heterodox or Nastika schools, the direct inheritors of this powerful movement of free thought. Philosophical traditions of ancient India have an unbroken history stretching back thousands of years. One of the major departures here is that Indian thought has never been just an academic pursuit. It's always been a blend of deep philosophical thinking about reality and existence combined with actual spiritual practice. During the period between 1500 to about 1000 BC, in the era of the Janapadas, small population centers, the foundation for all of the philosophical inquiry was established with a collection of sacred texts called as the Vedas. The four main Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda, compiled as Aparushaya Shruti, not from a human origin. The Rig Veda is widely regarded as one of the oldest scriptures in human literature. By around the 8th century BC, the metaphysical wisdom within these Vedas was further refined into what was referred to as the Upanishads, also referred as Vedanta. Vedanta means essence or the conclusion of the Vedas. By the 6th century BC, with the advent of the Iron Age, as agricultural output increases, population grew. This extends into expansions in trade networks, cross-cultural exchanges with other civilizations. By this period, smaller population centers had evolved and merged into larger cities, and kingdoms expanded into Mahajanapadas. At the same time, there was a widespread discontent brewing amongst various sections of the society, especially amongst the working class, traders, merchants, and the rulers, against the nascent domination of the Brahminical priestly class. This period is referred to as the Shramana movement. The Darshana period, characterized with enlightened thinkers, philosophers who contributed with their diverse philosophies, collectively referred to as Darshanas, unique perspectives. We had officially entered the golden age of philosophical inquiry and formal schools of thought in India. These philosophical schools were split into two main camps based on one simple question: do you accept the authority of the Vedas or not? The Orthodox schools, Astika, accepted the authority of the Vedas. There are 6 of these classical schools, including well-known ones like Yoga and Vedanta. The Heterodox schools, Nastika, rejected the authority of the Vedas. Instead, they based their teachings on the insights of their own enlightened founders. The most famous examples are Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and a materialist school called Charavaka. Vardhaman Mahavira and Siddhartha Gautama, also known as Buddha, were born and they founded Jainism and Buddhism. These philosophies gained traction through the efforts of monasteries, missionaries and spread rapidly through trade networks in the Indian subcontinent. As Nastika schools, Jainism, and Buddhism flourished, the once vibrant Hinduism now was in decline, thus struggling for acceptance amongst people. During the 2nd and the 4th century CE, Buddhism continued its dominance with philosophical variants through contributions from the brilliant philosopher Nagarjuna and half-brothers Asanga and Vasubandhu. By 8th century CE, with the arrival of Adi Shankaracharya and his non-dual philosophy, there was a strong revival in the Astika schools. This continues to revitalize the philosophical landscape towards Astika philosophies and the overall rejuvenation of Hinduism in India. This momentum is further maintained by contributions from other philosophers like Sri Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Nimbarkacharya, and Vallabhacharya between 8th century and 15th century. By 15th century, Hinduism had re-established itself in India through both the Jnana Marga, path of knowledge, and Bhakti Marga, the path of devotion. And finally, by the 15th century, with Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Sikhism was born in Punjab, India. Sikhism was thoroughly nourished by the incredible contributions of 9 other subsequent Sikh gurus. Sikhism in India begins to find strong roots among the people. Even with this major disagreements between Nastika and Astika schools, they were still part of the same larger conversation. They all debated a shared set of core concepts that is central to Indian thought. Karma, the universal law of moral cause and effect. Samsara, the repeating cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Dharma, one's duty, the cosmic order, or the right way to live. And this brings us to the ultimate goal. For nearly all of these traditions, the entire point of philosophy and life itself was to achieve moksha or nirvana for Buddhists. This liberation, breaking free from suffering inherent in the endless cycles of rebirth. So the philosophical quest in India wasn't just search for knowledge. It was a practical pursuit of ultimate freedom. The 6th century BC was an age of profound change in the Indian landscape. This was an era of socio-economic transformations, political restructuring, and an upsurge in the counterculture. The primary catalyst for the economic revolution was the widespread adoption of iron technology, which became prevalent by the 6th century BC. The use of iron plowshare allowed for effective cultivation of the heavy alluvial soil of the Gangetic Plains, a task that had been difficult with earlier wooden or copper tools. This, with the new agricultural techniques such as transplantation of paddy rice, led to a dramatic increase in food production and the creation of a substantial and reliable agricultural surplus for the first time in the region's history. This agricultural surplus was the engine of urbanization, as it could support a large population of non-food producers concentrated in an urban center. This agricultural surplus set off a chain of changes to bring about the significant overhaul of the larger economic environment. These new cities fostered a diversification of the economy beyond agriculture, with a variety of specialized artisans such as metalworkers, textile producers, potters, and ivory carvers, who often organized themselves into professional guilds, shrainis. Large, often fortified cities emerged as urban centers and hubs of political administration, craft, production, and commerce. The surplus production and specialized crafts fueled the growth of extensive trade networks that connected the cities of the Gangetic Plains with each other and with more distant regions. To facilitate this increasingly complex commercial activity, the older system of barter was gradually supplemented and replaced by a metallic currency, primarily of silver or copper, punchmark coins, signaling the emergence of a monetized economy. The second urbanization thus created a new socio-economic reality, and the most successful actors in this new world were the merchants and the financiers, the satis who belonged to the Vaishya Varna. Concurrent with the economic revolution, the second urbanization, the political landscape of northern India was undergoing a parallel and equally profound transformation. The older, smaller settlements of kin-based tribal polities of the Vedic period were known as Janapadas. They were giving way to larger, more complex territorial states known as Mahajanapadas, creating a new political environment of competition, consolidation, and patronage that new religious movements could skillfully navigate. Among the competing Mahajanapadas, the kingdom of Magadha in modern-day Bihar steadily rose to a position of preeminence. Its ascendancy was driven by a combination of factors: a strategic location controlling riverine trade, access to rich iron deposits for weapons, a large population for armies, the pioneering use of war elephants, and a succession of ambitious and pragmatic rulers like Bimbisara and Ajatashatru. They were succeeded by equally ambitious dynasties like the Nanda, Maurya, and the Shunga dynasties, with their dominant empires spreading across large parts of northern, central, and western parts of India. While the fourfold Varna system theoretically placed the Brahmins at the pinnacle of the social hierarchy, actual political and military power resided with the Kshatriyas, the warrior and ruling class. This disjuncture between ritual status and temporal power fueled a deep-seated and persistent rivalry between the two upper Varnas. This power struggle is a recurring theme in ancient Indian literature, reflected in mythological conflicts such as that between Brahmin sage Vashishta and Kshatriya king Vishwamitra, or the legend of the Brahmin warrior Parashurama's annihilation of the Kshatriyas. In the rigid Brahminical hierarchy, Vaishyavarna were ranked third, subordinate to both priests, Brahmins, and the warrior class, the Kshatriyas. Some of their core economic activities, such as lending money on interest, were viewed with disdain in the orthodox Brahminical legal texts. This created a profound social tension. The most dynamic and economically powerful class in society was systematically denied a corresponding level of social and ritual status. This status anxiety made the merchant class exceptionally receptive to new religious movements like Jainism and Buddhism, which rejected birth-based hierarchy and offered an alternative path to social recognition and spiritual merit through ethical actions and generosity. With these social and economic transformations, religious and political strife and tensions in the society, the stage was set for a significant overhaul in the Indian landscape. A diverse array of wandering ascetics, philosophers, and debaters, known as the Shramanas, strivers or one who toils, emerged as a powerful countercurrent to Vedic Brahmanism. Though they represented a wide spectrum of beliefs, these movements were united by a set of common principles that stood in direct opposition to the orthodox tradition. The merchant, the trader, and banking communities formed the financial bone of the early Jain and Buddhist movements. by funding the construction of temples, monasteries, stupas, and cave dwellings for wandering monks, and by providing alms to the monastic community, they gained immense spiritual merit, punya. This religious activity also translated into tangible social prestige, elevating their status in a way the rigid Varna system did not allow. Jain and Buddhist monks often traveled with merchant caravans, providing spiritual guidance and receiving sustenance in return. This close association ensured that Jainism and Buddhism spread organically along expanding trade routes of ancient India, carried by its most ardent and wealthy supporters. A significant number of royal dynasties and rulers became patrons of Jainism. Early supporters included powerful monarchs of the Mahajanapada period, such as King Bimbisara of Magadha and Nanda dynasty. The most famous instance of royal conversion is that of Emperor Chandragupta Maurya, founder of the Mauryan Empire, who, according to Jain tradition, abdicated his throne to become a Jain monk and migrated to the south. Emperor Ashoka, grandson of Chandragupta Maurya, had embraced Buddhism and, along with his family, became an ardent supporter for the spread of Buddhism in the countries in and around the Indian subcontinent. The Shramana counterculture vehemently rejected Vedic orthodoxy. They rejected the divine authority of the Vedas and the ritual supremacy of the Brahmin priesthood. They dismissed the efficacy of external rituals and sacrifices as a means to spiritual progress. They challenged the legitimacy of the birth-based Varna system, often advocating for a more egalitarian social vision. They emphasize personal experience, individual effort, ascetic practices, tapas, and meditation as the true path for achieving spiritual liberation, moksha, from the endless cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, samsara. The teachings of Jainism and Buddhism were available in vernacular languages like Pali and Magadhi, thereby making them accessible to the common people. Spiritual knowledge was democratized by making it accessible for women, members of the lower class of the society, who were previously forbidden from studying the Vedas. Jainism and Buddhism were adaptable to prevailing customs, traditions, and rituals of the lands they were spreading into. Though the initial teachings of Jainism and Buddhism required people to renounce the world, they were subsequently adapted and modified to suit householders where they could access these religions without renouncing the world. A key to Buddhism's global success was its flexibility. As it moved into new cultures, it often blended with local beliefs and practices in a process known as syncretism. For example, in China, it absorbed concepts like ancestor veneration from Confucianism and Taoism. This adaptability allowed it to be accepted and integrated into diverse societies rather than being seen as a completely foreign religion. Here is an ancient land where for tens of centuries the prevailing culture was dominated by traditional practices of offerings to the fire god and invocations to the deities representing natural forces through Vedic rituals. By 600 BC, it is heartwarming and inspiring at the same time to observe people choosing equal acceptance and adoption of a counterculture that is positioned directly in opposition to these traditional Vedic practices. People in various strates of the society were seeking for means to liberation, and Nastika schools offered them an alternative approach towards that. Here in this section, we explore a host of philosophers that belong to the Nastika schools from the Charavaka, Jainism, Buddhism, and finally, Sikhism. Ajita Keshakambali. The true origins of Charavaka school of philosophy is unknown, widely debated, but most historians believe Ajita Keshakambali in the 6th century BC as one of the legendary founders of the materialist Charavaka or Lokayata school. This school was infamous for their hedonistic views, maintaining that pleasure alone is the ultimate goal of life. With their philosophy firmly founded on hedonism, Charavaka school chose to defy and position itself pretty much against all the established norms, beliefs of their times. They denounced religious practices, rituals, and the caste system, considering them as artificial and meaningless. Charavaka school rejected the supernatural or the cosmic supreme being, also the God, rejected the laws of causality, cause and effect, and thereby extended to reject karma, the universal law of moral cause and effect. Charavaka school also did not believe in the individual soul, Atman, and thereby rejected rebirth. This extended to the refutation of the concept of heaven and hell as abodes after death. But they accepted the material world of people, objects, nature as real, and epistemologically considered only sensory perception as the valid source of knowledge. Parshvanatha, born in the 8th century BC, was the 23rd Tirthankara of Jainism. He is the earliest Jain leader acknowledged as a historical figure. Parshvanatha taught that every individual soul possesses infinite knowledge and boundless bliss, but this is obscured by ignorance, causing the soul to identify with the physical body. Through diligent practice of Bheda Jnana, which entails right belief and active awareness of one's true nature as a pure soul, unencumbered by the body and its passion, an individual can shed the perception obscuring Mohaniya karma. This enables a soul to experience its true essence, known as Samyaka Darshana or self-realization, opening the pathway to liberation from the cycles of birth and rebirth. Parshvanatha taught the core Jain principles of non-violence, ahimsa, non-attachment, aparigraha, non-stealing, asteya, and truthfulness, satya. Parshvanatha did not write any books or scriptures, but his teachings were mostly spread through oral traditions. Vardhaman Mahavira, the 24th and final Tirthankara, consolidated Jain philosophy and, based on the principles of non-violence, tolerance, and humility, established Jainism as a religion. These principles were not just in actions, but also in thought and in words. According to Mahavira, the goal of life is to achieve moksha, liberation, through self-realization and pure consciousness. He emphasized universal compassion and the inherent equality of all living beings. Mahavira rejected the idea of creator God and criticized the worship of deities for personal gain. Jain philosophy is known for unique metaphysical and epistemological concepts. Anekantavada, multiplicity of viewpoints. Here, Jain philosophy believes that reality can be viewed from multiple perspectives. To truly know the nature of reality, the seeker should thoroughly know every aspect of infinite perspectives of reality, which is impossible, thereby requiring the seeker to stay humble, tolerant in their approach towards exploring reality. Jain thinkers use the famous parable of blind men and an elephant to illustrate this concept. Each man touches a different part of the elephant, the trunk, a leg, a tail, and each confidently describes the entire creature based on their limited tactile experience, leading to conflicting and incomplete descriptions. Anekantavada suggests that only an omniscient being, a Kevali, can perceive the elephant in its totality. Metaphysical Underpinnings of Anekantavada are rooted in the Jain understanding of the Dravya, substance. Every substance is characterized by its gunas, essential and permanent qualities, and its paryayas, transitory modes or forms. A substance is eternal in its essential nature, but simultaneously subject to constant change through arising and ceasing of its modes. For example, a piece of gold is a substance. Its qualities include yellowness, malleability, and density, which are inherent to it. Its modes, however, can change. It can be fashioned into a ring, a necklace, or a coin. While the form or mode changes, the underlying substance, gold, and its essential qualities persist. Anekantavada accommodates both permanence of the substance and the impermanence of its modes, asserting that a reality is a dynamic interplay of persistence and change. This allows Jain philosophy to reconcile seemingly contradictory philosophical positions such as eternalism and nihilism. Syadavada, relativism or theory of conditioned predication, is another unique concept in Jain epistemology. This is a logical principle extending Anekantavada, stating that any statement about reality is conditional or relative to a certain perspective. It prefaces any statement about reality with the word syad, meaning in some way or from a certain perspective. This qualification acknowledges the partiality of the statement and avoids absolute assertions. Let's examine with an example. If the current weather in my city is 72 degrees, nice, crisp, pleasant, but today if I'm joined by a friend who normally lives in a hot, scorching desert, 72 degrees weather will feel quite cold for him. Additionally, if another friend from a Siberian tundra joins me today, he is going to feel 72 as quite warm and toasty. The same actual temperature, but our perspectives depend on our conditioning and are relative to our past experiences. This system provides a structured framework for acknowledging the complexity of reality and the limitations of language and fully expressing it. Jainism introduced 5 great vows, Mahavratas. These are fundamental ethical principles of Jainism. Ahimsa, non-violence, the practice of non-injury to all living beings in thought, word, and deed. Satya, truthfulness, adhering to the path of truth. Asteya, non-stealing, not taking anything that has not been given freely. Brahmacharya, chastity, abstinence from sensual pleasures and overindulgence. Aparigraha, non-possession or non-attachment, complete detachment from material possessions and worldly attachments. Here's a quick summary of Jain philosophy on various beliefs. Jainism does not believe in a creator God, but it does believe in the existence of divine beings and perfect souls called jinas or tirthankaras. Jain philosophy believes in the material world as real, accepts laws of karma, and thereby accepts cycles of birth, death, and rebirth as resultant from our karmas. They also believe in the presence of an Atman or individual soul within each living being. And yes, Jains strongly believe in and strive for liberation or moksha. Mahavira did not write any books or scriptures. For many centuries, his teachings were orally transmitted from teacher to disciple. They were later on written on palm leaves, and this collection was referred to as Agama Sutras. These include Acharanga Sutra, describes the conduct of ascetics and Mahavira's penance. Kalpa Sutra contains biographies of Tirthankaras, including Mahavira. Samavayanga Sutra a collection of Mahavira's teachings, and Bhagavati Sutra, a large text written in question and answer format that explains the subtleties of Jain knowledge. Siddhartha Gautama Buddha. In the 5th century BC, amidst the splendors of a royal palace in Lumbini, in present-day Nepal, a prince was born into the Shakya clan. He was Siddhartha Gautama, son of a reigning monarch, King Shuddhodana, and an heir to a kingdom of immense privilege. Siddhartha Gautama began his life surrounded by every worldly comfort, but would one day renounce his crown to find the ultimate truth, becoming known forever as Gautama Buddha, the Enlightened One. Upon Siddhartha's birth, a prophecy echoed through the court. The boy was destined for one of two paths. He would either become a world-conquering monarch, Chakravartin, or a world-renouncing ascetic, a great spiritual teacher. Hunted by the vision of his son abandoning the throne, King Shuddhodana resolved to defy destiny itself. He imprisoned the prince not with chains, but with pleasure, cocooning him within the palace walls. Siddhartha was surrounded by youth, beauty, and delight, a world meticulously cleansed of any sight that could reveal the harsh truths of suffering, old age, and death. Despite the king's meticulous efforts, destiny could not be contained within the palace walls. On a rare journey into his kingdom, Prince Siddhartha was finally confronted by the raw, unfiltered truths of the human condition. In a series of divinely orchestrated encounters, he witnessed what had been hidden from him his entire life: a man ravaged by sickness, another bent and frail with old age, a grieving procession carrying a corpse, and finally a serene ascetic monk walking with peaceful purpose. These four sights shattered his world of curated pleasure. The reality of suffering, decay, and death pierced him to the core, rendering his own life of luxury meaningless. Haunted by this profound awakening, he made a choice of staggering consequence. In what would become as the Great Renunciation, he silently left behind his wife, his newborn son, and his claim to the throne, venturing into the darkness of the forest on a solitary quest to find the definitive answer to human suffering for all beings. Siddhartha Gautama spent 6 years practicing extreme asceticism, renouncing all comforts and engaging in severe self-discipline. Realizing that extreme austerities were not the path to spiritual liberation, he began to eat again and then sat under the peepal tree, now the Bodhi tree, to meditate. According to tradition, he meditated for about 49 days, facing down temptations and obstacles to reach full enlightenment, known as Bodhi. His enlightenment provided a profound understanding of the nature of reality and the causes of suffering. His teachings gave rise to Buddhism, one of the most influential religions of its times, spread far and wide through monasteries and preaching by missionaries. Gautama Buddha's core teachings, summarized as the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, center on ending suffering by understanding its cause. The Four Noble Truths. Life is inherently unsatisfactory and includes suffering. Suffering arises from cravings, desires, and attachments. Suffering can cease by eliminating its root causes. The way to end suffering is the Noble Eightfold Path. So what is the Noble Eightfold Path? This Noble Eightfold Path is a comprehensive guide for living a life of virtue, mental discipline, and wisdom. Right understanding and right thought form the basis for wisdom. Right speech, action, and livelihood define ethical conduct. Right effort, mindfulness, and concentration highlight mental discipline. A quick summary of Buddhist philosophy. They believed in the material world as real, accepted cycles of birth, death, and rebirth due to our karmas. They believed in the liberation of human suffering through practices. They rejected the presence of a supreme being or God, and also did not believe in the presence of Atman or the individual soul. While the Buddha did not write any of the scriptures himself, they were compiled from his orally transmitted teachings. The scriptures containing Buddhist teachings are collectively known as the Pali Canon in the Theravada Buddhism. They're organized into the three Pitaka or of the Vinaya Pitaka, Sutta Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. Another influential collection, the Mahayana Sutras, containing additional teachings accepted by the Mahayana Buddhists, such as the Lotus Sutra, but these were not accepted by all the Buddhists. The Pali Canon. Vinaya Pitaka, Basket of Discipline, is a collection of monastic rules and disciplinary guidelines for monks and nuns. Sutta Pitaka, Basket of Discourses, contains Buddhist discourses, teachings, sermons on various topics, including meditation and the Four Noble Truths. The Dhammapada, a famous collection of Buddha's sayings in verse, is a part of the Sutta Pitaka. Abhidhamma Pitaka, Basket of Special Teachings, is a philosophical and analytical examination of the teachings in the Sutta Pitaka. Through the efforts of missionaries and monasteries, support of dominant rulers and merchant communities, Buddhism spread across India and throughout Asia, becoming dominant in Southeast Asia, East Asia, and Tibet, and eventually to the rest of the world. Today it is one of the fourth largest religions in the world. Buddha's teachings gave rise to numerous schools of thought, most notably Theravada, the way of the elders, Mahayana, the great vehicle, and Vajrayana, the diamond vehicle. Concepts pioneered by the Buddha, such as mindfulness, are now central to many forms of modern psychology and psychotherapy. Example, the mindfulness-based stress reduction. His philosophy continues to influence modern ethics, philosophy of mind, and contemplative science. Nagarjuna, a brilliant philosopher, thinker, born in the 2nd century CE, was one of the most revered Buddhist philosophers after Buddha. He postulated the doctrine of emptiness, Shunyata, and founded the Madhyamika Shunyavada school. Nagarjuna asserts that all phenomena are devoid of intrinsic, independent existence. Instead, everything is interconnected and nothing possesses a fixed, unchanging nature. Nagarjuna's philosophy avoids two extremes: the nihilistic view that nothing exists, and the extreme of eternalism, which posits enduring fixed substances. He placed his philosophy somewhere in between these two extremes, thereby the name Madhyamika, middle way Shunyavada school. The two truths, conventional and ultimate. To avoid nihilism, Nagarjuna taught there are two levels of truth. Conventional truth, Samavritti Satya, the reality we experience in daily life, where things appear to have distinct identities and exist as they seem. Ultimate truth, Paramartha Satya, the understanding that on the deepest level, all things are empty of inherent nature, as described by emptiness. Liberation is achieved by realizing that phenomena are empty and interdependent. Individuals are freed from the strong impulse to grasp and cling, which is the root of suffering. This realization fosters unconditional compassion for all beings, laying the foundation for the Mahayana Bodhisattva path. Around the 4th and 5th centuries CE, half-brothers Asanga and Vasubandhu systematized the Yogacara school of Mahayana Buddhism, also called as the practice of yoga. This school is also known as Vijnanavada, doctrine of consciousness. They argued reality as we perceive it is nothing but a projection of consciousness. This tradition focuses on the inner workings of consciousness to explain experience, reality, and the path to liberation. So, what is the central doctrine of Vijnanavada? According to Vijnanavada, objects we perceive as an external independent world are in fact projections or manifestations of consciousness. Vijnanavada posits no external objects. The world as it appears with a seemingly separate subject mind, perceiving a separate object, matter, is a mental construct. This is often illustrated with the metaphor of a dream. The objects in a dream are experienced as real, but they are entirely the creation of the mind. The purpose of Vijnanavada is not simply to assert a metaphysical idealism that only mind exists, but rather to address the root of suffering, the illusion of self and a separate reality, by pointing out that the duality of subject and object is a cognitive error that keeps beings trapped in samsara, the cycle of suffering. To systematically explain how experience is constructed, Yogacara developed an elaborate model of consciousness called Ashtavijnana, 8 consciousnesses, expanding on the traditional Buddhist list of 6. This model includes 5 sensory consciousness: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch; the mind, manas; the ego consciousness, that creates primary illusion of a separate I, also called as ahankara; and the alaya vijnana, the substrate of karma, vasanas, and bijas that give rise to all phenomena. Guru Nanak Dev, born in 1469 in Punjab, India, laid the foundation for Sikhism as a monotheistic religion. This period was a time of significant social and religious strife between the Hindus and the Muslims. Sikhism is derived from the word Sikhi in Punjabi language, which means disciple or learner, signifying a lifelong journey of learning and spiritual development. After a profound spiritual experience, Guru Nanak Dev Ji declared, "Na koi Hindu, na koi Musalman," meaning there is no Hindu, there is no Muslim, proclaiming the universal brotherhood of all humanity under one God. The spiritual authority of Guru Nanak was passed down through a succession of 9 subsequent gurus. Each guru reinforced and expanded upon the original teachings. The early 17th century India was marked by religious persecution of the Sikhs, Hindus, and other religious minorities by the ruling Mughals, forcing them to convert to Islam. Mughal emperors Jahangir and later on Aurangzeb ordered the Sikh gurus to be tortured, beheaded for refusing to convert to Islam. In response to these heinous acts and oppression, in 1699, Guru Gobind Singh Ji established the Khalsa, a collective body of initiated Sikhs committed to the saint soldier, Sant Sipahi ideal, being spiritually devoted while also being prepared to defend justice and the oppressed. He is also credited to have introduced the Panja Kakar, the 5 Ks, 5 articles of faith: Kesh, Ganga, Kada, Kachera, and Kirpan, that baptized Sikh men and women wear at all times to signify their commitment to Sikhism and to distinguish themselves as Khalsa Sikhs. They are symbols of Sikhs' spiritual convictions, commitment to righteousness, and dedication to Sikh principles, acting as a constant reminder to live an ethical and devout life. Let's understand the 5 Ks, the Panch Kakar, and their significance. Kesh, uncut hair, represents the acceptance of God's will and perfection of God's creation. Kangha, wooden comb, symbolizes cleanliness and discipline used to maintain the kesh. Kada, steel bracelet, a reminder of the eternal nature of God and the wearer's commitment to righteous conduct. Kachera, cotton underwear, signifies modesty and self-restraint. Kirpan, ceremonial sword, represents Sikh commitment to justice, equality, and the defense of the oppressed. The 5 Ks are a public declaration of Sikhs' allegiance to the teachings of Guru Gobind Singh. Wearing them provides a distinct identity and helps Khalsa Sikhs stand out in a crowd, signifying their commitment to a life of virtue. The Kakars serve as a constant internal compass, guiding the wearer to live with integrity, humility, and compassion. Before his passing, he declared the Sikh scripture, the Adi Granth, as the final and eternal living Guru. From that point on, it became known as Guru Granth Sahib. Let's explore the core philosophical tenets of Sikhism. The oneness of God, Ik Omkar. This is the cornerstone of Sikh theology, meaning there is one supreme being. God is understood as the sole creator, formless, Nirakar, timeless, Akal, and beyond human comprehension. God is both transcendent, existing beyond the material world, and immanent, present within all of creation. The goal of a Sikh is to cultivate a personal, loving relationship with this one God. Rituals and social hierarchy. Sikhism denounces blind rituals, superstitions, idol worship, and pilgrimages performed for merit. The emphasis is on genuine inner devotion. It vehemently rejects caste system and any other social hierarchy based on birth, wealth, or gender. The ethical principles and core values of Sikhism. Sikhism firmly established its ethical foundations on equality, selfless service, and welfare to all. Sikhism is founded on the principle that all people are equal in the eyes of God, regardless of caste, creed, color, gender, or nationality. Women have always held a position of complete equality with men in Sikhism, with access to all religious roles and responsibilities. Serving humanity without any desire for personal gain is a central tenet in Sikh life. It is considered a form of prayer and a practical way to show devotion to God by serving His creation. Sarbat da Bhala, welfare to all. This phrase is a part of daily Sikh prayer. It is a plea to God for the well-being, peace, and prosperity of all humanity, not just Sikhs. This encapsulates the universal and humanitarian outlook of the faith. A Sikh is encouraged to cultivate 5 virtues: Sat, truth; Daya, compassion; Santokh, contentment; Nimrata, humility; and Pyar, love. Let's take a look at a quick summary of the Sikh philosophy. They believe in the material world as real, accept laws of karma, and also in the cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. They accept a monotheistic supreme being and also believe in the Atman, or the individual soul residing within us. According to Sikh beliefs, mukti or liberation is the release from the continuous cycles of birth, death, and rebirth, which is seen as state of being trapped due to worldly attachments and ignorance.